My name's Elias Mercer. I'm 27, a Catholic priest, and until 2 weeks ago, I thought my job was simple. Hear confessions, say Mass, smile politely at potlucks, and maybe fix the occasional leaky pipe in the church hall. That was before the bells rang. Before I found the letter. Before I broke the rules. My first assignment after ordination was the Church of St. Avinas, tucked away in the woods of northern Maine. I'd never even heard of the place before the bishop gave me the folder. It wasn't a big church, maybe 40 parishioners on a good Sunday, but it was old. Really old. The kind of place with iron candelabras bolted to the walls and hymnals that hadn't been touched since the 70s. The stone bell tower leaned just enough to make you nervous when the wind picked up. The church secretary, Margaret, was in her 60s and ran everything like a military operation. First thing she told me when I arrived was that the bell tower hadn't worked since her husband fell through the floorboards 20 years ago. The whole place is half rotted, she said. We don't go up there anymore. No one's touched the ropes in decades. I nodded and smiled, grateful for a quiet post. I moved into the rectory next door that same night. It smelled like old books and candles that had burned too low. The room that used to belong to Father Rawls, the priest before me, was locked. I figured it was for privacy or maybe respect. He'd left suddenly, the bishop had said, though nobody really explained what that meant. It was the third night when I started hearing noises. Not voices exactly, just sounds, like someone shifting around in the attic. But the attic was sealed off. The door was nailed shut and the key didn't work. Still, every night around 3 a.m., I'd wake up to the same faint creaks and taps coming from above my room. I tried to ignore it. I didn't want to be that guy, the rookie priest who starts jumping at shadows and calls the diocese screaming about demons after 1 week. But then the letter appeared. It happened while I was reorganizing the vestry. The bookshelf behind the sacristy had been crooked for days, and I decided to finally fix it. When I moved it, I noticed the wall behind it had a strange discoloration, darker in a square shape, like something had been hidden there. I knocked, and sure enough, it was hollow. I pried the panel loose with a letter opener and found a small wooden recess carved into the stone wall. Inside was a black envelope sealed with brittle yellow wax, the color of old teeth. My name was written on it in tight, spidery handwriting. E. Mercer. I felt something in my stomach shift, like I'd just stepped off a curb in the dark and hadn't hit the ground yet. I opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of parchment, folded carefully, and a key. Small, rusted and cold, even in my hand. The letter was handwritten, slanted, shaky, signed Father Rawls. Here's what it said. If you're reading this, the chapel has chosen you. There's a trap door beneath the pulpit. Don't go looking for it unless the bells ring 3 times at exactly 3 a.m. If they do, then you have to follow the rules, all of them. Do not try to reason your way out. Do not bring anyone with you. Do not pray unless you are certain it's being heard. The rules. 1. Do not descend unless the bell rings exactly 3 times. 2. Bring no glass objects with you, not even your phone. 3. Before you open the trapdoor, knock 3 times. Wait for silence. 4. If someone calls your name from the pulpit while you're below, do not reply. 5. You will see a woman in a gray veil. She will offer you water. Do not drink. 6. Speak only if addressed in Latin. 7. Do not step outside the chalk circle, no matter what you see or hear. 8. Leave before the final candle goes out. If it burns out while you're still inside, you will not leave. There's a book down there. Use it. Nothing else works. God help you. Father R. I read the letter 3 times. My hands were shaking by the end. Not because I believed it. I didn't. Not then. But I could feel something was wrong. And I couldn't shake the feeling that the envelope hadn't just been there. It had appeared. That night, I barely slept. Every creak in the house made my heart jump. I checked my watch every 30 minutes. At 2:59 a.m., I was sitting up in bed, staring at the ceiling, heart hammering. The air felt thick, like it was too heavy to breathe. The silence outside was so complete it felt unnatural. And then it happened. The first bell hit like a punch to the chest. It rang through the floorboards, through my bones. I sat frozen, my watch ticking slowly to 3 o'clock. The third bell was higher, not louder, higher, almost like it wasn't metal anymore, like something was imitating a bell and getting it wrong. The sound made my skin crawl. I grabbed the key, the letter, and my flashlight. No phone, no glass. I remembered the rules. I left the rectory and stepped into the chapel. The old doors groaned, and the air inside was different, stale, like a crypt. The candles on the altar were already lit. I hadn't lit them. I walked to the pulpit. I didn't have to search long. A small wooden panel beneath it was loose, just like the letter said. I pulled it aside and found the trap door. There was a handle, and a chain wrapped around it, but no lock. I stared at it, heart pounding. Then, slowly, I raised my hand and knocked 3 times. I waited. No sound, no movement, just the whisper of candlelight behind me. I unwrapped the chain and lifted the trap door. A breath of cold air hit my face, wet, earthy, like the inside of a cave. Below me was a narrow stone staircase carved unevenly into the earth. The flashlight flickered. I tapped it, and it steadied. I looked back once at the altar. The candles were burning low, wax dripping onto the cloth. Then I stepped down into the dark. The staircase was tighter than I expected. The walls were stone, rough and moist, like the inside of an old well. My flashlight beam danced across moss, patches of black mold and carvings, faint ones, maybe centuries old, etched into the rock. Crosses, eyes, symbols I didn't recognize. The deeper I went, the colder it got, like the air was falling instead of rising. About 20 steps down, the ground leveled out. I found myself in a small circular chamber, maybe 10 feet across. The floor was dirt, packed hard and uneven. The walls curved slightly inward, like I was inside a buried silo. The only thing in the room was a white chalk circle drawn carefully on the floor, thick and unbroken, like it had been made recently. 5 candles stood at equal points around it, flickering low. The heat from them didn't reach me. Inside the circle was a short stone table, worn smooth. Sitting on it was a small black book, square and heavy-looking, covered in dust. I took a step forward and froze. Someone else was down there. She was standing in the far corner, just outside the circle of candlelight. I hadn't heard her. I hadn't seen her until she moved. A slow, subtle shift of her head toward me. I don't know how long she'd been standing there. She was barefoot, wearing a gray veil over her head and shoulders, and holding something in her hands. A chipped tin cup, full of water that shimmered in the candlelight. My mouth went dry. She stepped forward just slightly, enough for the light to hit her face. I wish it hadn't. She wasn't old exactly, but her skin was too tight, like dried leather. Her lips were colorless. Her eyes were clouded over, but they locked on mine anyway. And then, in a quiet voice that scratched at my nerves like sandpaper, she said, "Father Mercer, you must be thirsty." I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I remembered the letter. Rule number 5. The woman in the veil will offer you water. Do not drink. She held the cup out to me. "Just 1 sip," she whispered. "You've come so far." Her voice was gentle, almost kind, but it didn't belong in that space. It was too soft, too smooth, like someone trying to imitate a human voice but not quite getting the cadence right. I didn't answer. I took a slow step backward, toward the chalk circle. Her eyes followed me, her hand still outstretched. "Don't be rude, Elias." She said my name again. That made me pause. There was no way she should have known it. I hadn't said it. I hadn't spoken since I got down here. I crossed into the circle and sat on the stone bench. The candles around me flared slightly. I picked up the black book. It was heavier than it looked. My hands left prints in the dust on its cover. She was still there, standing just at the edge of the light, cup in hand, lips twitching into a crooked little smile. I didn't look at her again. I opened the book. Inside were prayers written in Latin, but not the ones I'd studied. These were older, more brutal in language, precise but sharp. They didn't read like blessings. They read like commands. The first line on the first page said in Latin, "Not in my name, but in his name." I turned the page. The prayers were short, rhythmic. There were notes in the margins, handwritten in what I assumed was Rawls's script. Things like, "Only read aloud if flame is stable," and "Do not read backwards." I kept flipping until I found a page marked with a thin black ribbon. Scrawled above the prayer in red ink were the words, "Start here. Only if ready." I wasn't ready, but the candles were burning lower. I couldn't tell how long they had left. 10 minutes? 20? And that last rule. Rule number 8. Leave before the final candle goes out. If it does, you will not leave. I cleared my throat and read the opening words aloud. The moment I spoke, the candlelight changed. It sharpened, shifting from soft yellow to a harder white-blue glow. The air inside the circle grew still, like I was sitting inside a vacuum. The veil woman made a soft noise, something between a sigh and a hiss, and stepped back into the darkness. I kept reading. Each word was a weight. Each syllable pulled something loose inside my chest. The Latin felt strange in my mouth, but also familiar, like muscle memory from another life. As I reached the midpoint of the prayer, something cracked behind me, sharp, loud, like stone splitting. I didn't turn. Then I heard it. A voice from above, echoing down the stairwell.
"Elias."
It was soft, twisted, too long, not quite a whisper, not quite a voice. It was coming from the pulpit. I kept reading. The voice came again, louder, more confident.
"Elias, come up, it's safe now."
Rule number 4. If someone calls your name from the pulpit while you're below, do not reply. I kept my mouth shut and stared at the page, willing myself not to move. I repeated the last line of the prayer again, this time louder. The candles flared. The chalk circle pulsed with light like a heartbeat. The voice changed. Now it sounded like Margaret, the church secretary. "Elias," it said, soft and warm. "Something's happened. We need you. Please." I squeezed the book tighter, my knuckles white. My breath was shallow, sweat crawling down my back. I said the closing line of the prayer. As soon as I finished, a gust of cold air rushed through the room like a wind from the bottom of a mine. The woman in the veil vanished. One of the candles flickered violently, then another, the flame closest to me dimmed to a weak flicker. My time was running out. I snapped the book shut, stuffed it inside my coat, and stood up. Something groaned behind me, deep and guttural, like an animal exhaling its last breath. I walked carefully to the edge of the chalk circle. The line was still unbroken. The woman didn't reappear. I stepped over the chalk. The moment I did, the last candle went out. I sprinted. Up the stairs, 2 at a time, heart thudding so hard it blurred my vision. The air grew warmer as I climbed. I didn't look back. I didn't listen. The voice from the pulpit called again, this time louder, angrier.
"Elias!"
I didn't stop. I shoved the trapdoor open with both hands, scrambled onto the altar platform, and slammed it shut behind me. The chapel was pitch black, every candle out, every window dark. I stood up slowly. Something was wrong. The altar cloth had been pulled halfway off, and the chapel doors were wide open. The chapel doors weren't open when I went down there. I know that for certain. I had locked them myself. I remembered the click of the bolt. I remembered even checking it twice out of habit, like I always did. But now they stood wide, creaking gently in the windless night. I stood frozen at the pulpit, one foot still on the trap door, the rest of me not quite ready to move. My chest was tight. My heartbeat wasn't slowing down, and I couldn't seem to get a full breath. The candle smoke lingered in the air, curling in strange patterns like it was trying to write something across the dark. Outside the doors was nothing, just black. The trees, the gravel path, the old iron gate. It had all vanished into a thick, unnatural fog. And then something stepped into view, barefoot, pale, wearing a gray veil. I didn't wait to see if she'd speak again. I ran. I bolted through the side door and sprinted across the lot, shoes pounding against cracked concrete, breath ragged. My key jammed twice before I got the rectory unlocked. I slammed the door shut behind me, turned both locks, and slid down onto the floor, shaking. The silence was worse than the noise. No wind, no insects, no traffic, just my ragged breath and the faint creak of the chapel doors swinging open behind me, over and over like a metronome marking the countdown to something I didn't want to meet. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the kitchen with the black book on the table, every light in the house on, the letter laid out beside me. I kept going over the rules over and over, trying to convince myself I'd followed them all exactly, that I hadn't broken anything. But then I saw it. Rule 8. Leave before the final candle goes out. I had waited too long. That last flame died the moment I stepped out of the circle. That final second, I told myself it was close enough, that I made it in time. But I didn't. And something new. The next morning I tried to act normal. I shaved, brewed coffee, and said my morning prayers. Margaret showed up around 8:30 a.m., carrying her usual pile of folders and complaints about the boiler. "You look like hell," she said, not unkindly. "Didn't sleep well," I answered. "Strange night." She paused in the hallway and glanced toward the chapel. We had some weather roll through. Looked foggy as sin around 3 a.m. My stomach tightened. "Did you hear anything?" I asked. She shook her head. "Nope, though I thought I saw someone standing by the statue garden when I pulled in this morning. Could have just been my eyes." She laughed a little and kept walking, but I didn't move. There was no statue garden. Not anymore. It had been torn down a year before I arrived. They'd cleared it for a new storage shed that never got built. There were no statues left on the property. By noon, I couldn't take it anymore. I drove to the diocesan office. I didn't call ahead. I didn't ask permission. I just walked in and asked to speak with Bishop Carter. They kept me waiting for an hour. When he finally came out to meet me, he looked tired, older than I remembered. He didn't shake my hand. "Saint Avinas," he said, almost like a question. "What did you find?" I didn't waste time. I told him about the letter, the trap door, the rules. I told him about the veiled woman, the prayer book, the chalk circle. I told him I followed the rules mostly, and what I saw when I came back up. He listened silently the entire time. Didn't take notes, didn't interrupt. When I finished, he asked only one thing. "You stepped out of the circle after the last candle went out?" I hesitated. It was already flickering. I thought, that's not what I asked. I swallowed hard. Yes. The flame died as I crossed the edge. He looked down, closed his eyes for a moment, then nodded slowly, like he'd just confirmed something he didn't want to believe. "You'll need to leave the parish," he said. Immediately. What? You're not safe there anymore. No one is. I stared at him, unsure if I was supposed to laugh or panic. You're saying I'm being reassigned? He shook his head. No, I'm saying you'll need to leave that place and not go back. What about the church? Margaret? The people who live near it? They'll be fine, as long as they don't go into the chapel, and as long as you don't. He leaned in then, lowering his voice. Places like St. Avinas aren't churches anymore. They're prisons. They were built over something the early clergy couldn't destroy. So they locked it away, buried it, and kept watch. He tapped the black book in my coat pocket. That's your key now. Not for opening, for keeping it shut. I sat there, stunned. So what do I do with it? Leave. Go far. Don't talk about it. Don't read from it unless you have no other choice. And the rules? I asked. His eyes locked on mine. There was something behind them I hadn't seen before. Fear. You broke one. I didn't mean to. It doesn't matter. He stood up and offered me a card with a phone number on it. Just 7 digits. No name. If it speaks to you again, call that number. Don't call me. Don't call anyone else. Just that number. He left the room without another word. I drove back to the rectory in silence. The trees looked taller, the shadows deeper. The chapel sat in the distance like it was waiting for something, a wound that hadn't closed properly. That night, I locked every door and window, closed every curtain, and unplugged the landline. I placed the black book in a box, wrapped it in linen, and shoved it under the bed, but sleep still didn't come. At 3 a.m. on the dot, the bells rang. Once. Twice. 3 times. I held my breath, sitting in bed, covers up to my chest like a child. I waited. The knocking started at 3:07. 3 knocks. Slow, precise, at the back door. Then the voice followed. Not the whisper from the pit. This was different. It was mine. Elias, it said in my own voice right outside the door. You forgot something. I didn't move. I sat there in bed with the blanket clenched in both fists, frozen. I'd gone still in a way I didn't even think was possible. My body just locked up. Like whatever was outside already knew where I was, and any sudden move might make things worse. 3 knocks. Then silence. Then my voice again, just on the other side of the door, as calm as a mirror. Elias, you forgot something. It didn't sound distorted or monstrous. It didn't even sound threatening. That was the worst part. It sounded like I was outside, maybe calling into myself from a dream. Friendly, curious, patient. I sat like that for what felt like an hour, listening to nothing. Eventually, I forced myself out of bed. I didn't turn on any lights. I didn't want it to know I was up. I moved slow, trying not to make the floorboards creak, and grabbed the black book from beneath the bed. It felt heavier than before. As I unwrapped the linen, I realized it was warm, almost like it had been resting on a radiator, even though it had been sealed away in a box. I carried it with me to the kitchen and sat down at the table. I wanted to open it, but I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I just sat there staring at the back door. It was quiet now. Not just normal nighttime quiet. Dead quiet. Like the world had gone on pause and forgot to press play again. I got up. I walked slowly to the back door and stood in front of it. I didn't unlock it. I didn't touch the knob. I just listened. And then, something whispered directly into the keyhole.
Let me back in.
I jumped back so fast I knocked over the broom leaning next to the fridge. The sound of it hitting the floor echoed way too loud in the stillness. It felt like I'd broken something sacred. I stayed up till sunrise, gripping the book in one hand, phone in the other. I thought about calling that number the bishop gave me. I stared at it for an hour. 7 digits. No name. No clue what would answer. But I didn't call. Not yet. I didn't want to admit I needed to. The next morning, Margaret came in again, same as always, coffee in one hand, a stack of bills in the other. She stopped when she saw me sitting on the rectory couch, still in the same clothes from the night before. "Did you sleep at all?" "No." She sat beside me, resting the papers on her lap. "Was it the bell again?" I nodded. She exhaled, long and low. "You know," she said, "I always knew there was something wrong with this place." I looked at her. "You did?" "Yeah. You feel it when you're here long enough. The stillness. The way the trees never seem to move right. Like the whole town's been trapped in amber since 1965. She looked down at her coffee like she was reading something in the foam. "I just didn't think it would catch you too." There was a long pause between us. I think we both knew we were sitting on the edge of something, some final choice, and neither of us wanted to be the one to name it. "You should go," she said softly. "You're a good man, but this place, this church, it's not meant to be saved." "I can't," I replied. "It's not done with me." That made her look up sharply. "Elias, whatever's speaking to you, it's not God. Don't confuse the two." I opened my mouth to argue, but then I stopped. Because I didn't know anymore. That night, I didn't sleep either. I waited again. Not because I wanted to, but because something in me needed to see if it would come back. The way you can't help but check a sore spot with your tongue. It's stupid, and it hurts, but you still do it. 3 a.m. came. The bells rang again, 3 times, just like before. I waited. The knocking didn't come this time. Instead, I heard breathing, not outside, not in the hallway, from inside the house. I turned slowly, heart hammering, and looked toward the end of the hallway that led to the front room. The air was thick again. My ears were ringing. The lights in the kitchen dimmed just a little. And then I saw myself, standing at the end of the hall. Same clothes, same face, same tired eyes. He didn't move. He just watched me, head tilted slightly like a dog listening to a distant whistle. I didn't speak. I didn't move. He raised his hand and pointed at the black book still sitting on the kitchen table. Then he smiled. Not a nice smile. A cracked one, too wide, too many teeth, like someone had learned how to smile by looking at broken dolls. I lunged for the book. The instant I touched it, the figure vanished, gone like smoke in a gust. But something thudded upstairs. Footsteps, slow, heavy, moving across the second floor like someone dragging soaked clothes. I ran to the front door, threw it open, and stumbled outside barefoot into the cold, just trying to breathe. The fog was back, thicker now. The chapel was gone in it. Just a shape, a silhouette. I stayed outside until the sun came up. The next morning, the chapel doors were open again, wide open, no sign of forced entry, no footprints, no tracks. But the altar cloth was missing, and someone had drawn a chalk circle on the front steps. I swept it away with the church broom. I didn't want to think about what it meant. I didn't want to give it a name. But later that day, I finally opened the black book again. This time, something was different. A new page had been added at the front, one I hadn't seen before. A list, not of prayers, of names. Mine was at the bottom. E. Mercer. Below it, a blank space, waiting for the next. That night, I called the number. It rang once. Then someone answered. Not a voice, not even a word, just a sound, like fire being sucked into a vacuum. Then, "Where are you keeping the book?" the voice asked. Male, flat, almost mechanical. I have it with me. I've kept it wrapped, hidden." There was a pause. "Do not let it touch blood. Do not read from the white pages. And do not, under any circumstance, return to the chapel. What's happening to me? I asked, voice breaking. You broke a rule, the voice said. That's all it needs. Then the line went dead. That was last night. Now it's tonight again. I'm writing this because I don't know how many more I'll get. The bells are ringing again. 3 times. Right on time. But this time, the trapdoor is already open, and I can hear someone coming up. At first I thought it was just the house shifting, that old moan the walls make when the temperature drops, like a deep breath settling into wood. But no, this was heavier, rhythmic, footsteps, each one slow and deliberate, climbing up from the chapel beneath the church. But I wasn't in the chapel. I was in the rectory. And the trap door, locked, sealed, hidden under layers of stone and holy cloth, was open again. I stood in my bedroom holding the book against my chest like it could protect me. I hadn't unwrapped it since the night before. I didn't want to look at the new names. I didn't want to know if mine had moved further up the list. The house was dead silent except for the sound of someone or something making its way up the stairs that weren't supposed to exist. I hadn't built them. I hadn't seen them. But somehow, I knew. They were coming from the inside, from beneath the floors, beneath the walls, from the hollow belly of this church that had been waiting too long to feed again. I backed into the hallway, every hair on my arm standing up. I could hear the creaking now, just beyond the kitchen, just past the pantry. A slow dragging noise accompanied each step, like fabric soaked in mud being pulled across stone. I reached for the crucifix hanging on the wall beside the archway. Not because I thought it would save me, but because I needed something to hold that wasn't the book. I kept my eyes on the kitchen entrance. Nothing came through, but the hallway light above me began to dim, not flicker, just fade, like the electricity was being siphoned out of the air. My breath clouded in front of me, even though the heat had been running all day. Then I heard my name again. Not a whisper this time. Not the mimic. It was me. Exactly me. Elias. The voice came from the hallway behind me. I turned, and there I was again. Standing barefoot at the top of the stairs, wearing the same clothes as me. Same crucifix, same collar, same exhaustion carved into my face. Only the eyes were wrong. They were too calm, too still, like painted glass pretending to be alive. He took a step forward. I didn't wait this time. I ran. I grabbed the black book, bolted out the back door, and didn't even lock it behind me. The night was cold, sharper than it should have been. The fog had returned, but it wasn't outside the church grounds anymore. It was inside now, thick and oily, clinging to the trees and bushes like mold. I didn't have a plan. I just ran. Past the chapel, past the old tool shed, past the statue foundation that didn't have any statues. My lungs burned. The book felt heavier with each step, like it didn't want to be moved. I made it to the far end of the property, near the edge of the woods, where the old cemetery sat behind rusted black gates. I don't know why I stopped there. Maybe because it felt like the only place more dead than the thing chasing me. I dropped to my knees in front of the oldest grave I could find. The name was worn off, eaten away by wind and time. I unwrapped the black book and placed it down on the stone. It thudded like a dropped anvil. I opened it. The names were still there. Only now, my name was no longer last. 2 names had been added. Mahenderson T. Wyatt. I didn't know who they were, but underneath those at the very bottom was a line of fresh ink, still wet. It said, 1 name left. Then the page flipped on its own. The ink bled across the parchment, forming another prayer I hadn't seen before. This one wasn't in Latin. It wasn't even in any alphabet I recognized. Just loops and jagged slashes, symbols like claws. My eyes burned just looking at them. I slammed the book shut. Behind me, the trees groaned. Something was coming through the fog, not walking, just arriving, like the forest had opened its mouth and something crawled out. I turned, but I couldn't see it clearly. Just movement, shifting shadows, the shape of something that bent wrong. It didn't try to hide. It wanted me to know it was there. I grabbed the book, stood up, and shouted without thinking. "What do you want?" And the voice that answered wasn't mine. It wasn't human, but it used my mouth. To be finished. I stumbled backward into the grave marker, dropping the book again. The shape in the fog didn't move closer. It just waited. Then I heard footsteps behind me. I turned around fast, fists up, adrenaline spiking. Margaret stood there. Her face was pale, lips pressed in a tight line. "You brought it outside," she said. "I didn't know where else to go." "No," she interrupted. "You brought it out here, where it could breathe again." She stepped forward slowly. "You think that book is a weapon, Elias. It's not. It's a ledger. Every name it takes brings it closer to finishing its list. And once it's full..." She stopped talking, looked past me. I turned. The fog behind us was clearing, but only because something was pushing it aside. Something tall. Something wrong. I didn't wait to see more. I grabbed the book and ran again, Margaret close behind. We didn't talk. We didn't need to. The chapel was the only place that had held it in. That circle, those rules. That's what they were. A cage, a seal. And I had broken it. Back in the chapel, we slammed the doors and locked them tight. Margaret grabbed the old salt from the sacristy. I found the red chalk in the vestment drawer, the one I didn't remember buying. We redrew the circle in the center of the nave, exactly how the book had shown. We placed the 5 candles, lit them, placed the book in the middle. I knelt outside the circle. Margaret stood by the door, rosary in one hand, eyes fixed on the fog pressing against the stained glass windows like it wanted in. I started reading, the same words from the first night, louder now, clearer. Every syllable carved into the stone. The flames danced, the circle pulsed. Then the doors began to shake, first gently, then violently. Each blow echoed like a battering ram. Wood splintered, hinges screamed. But I kept reading. Margaret shouted something I didn't hear. She held the door as long as she could. Then it gave way, and she was gone. I didn't stop reading. Even as the doors slammed against the walls and the wind howled into the chapel like a living thing, even as the candles threatened to go out and my throat dried up from chanting the ancient words again and again, I didn't stop. The fog spilled into the church in thick waves like ink dropped into water. The temperature dropped so fast my fingers went numb. The black book began to vibrate slightly on the floor inside the circle, as if something beneath it was knocking. Wanting out or wanting in, I couldn't tell. Margaret was gone. Just gone. No scream, no last look, no sign of struggle. She had been there 1 second, holding the doors shut with both hands, and the next, nothing. Like something had reached in and erased her from the room. I wanted to cry, to run, to scream into the walls and ask God what the hell I was supposed to do. But I stayed. I kept reading. The words were burning now, not just in my mouth, but in my skull, in my hands. It felt like the book was feeding off me, each line taking something, strength, time, memory. The lines blurred on the page, letters twisting into each other, bleeding and pulsing like veins. Then I heard the footsteps. Not behind me, not on the other side of the chapel, inside the circle. I didn't look up. I couldn't look up. Rule number 7 flashed in my mind. Do not step outside the circle, no matter what you see or hear. But nothing in the rules said what to do if something joined you inside it. I tightened my grip on the book and kept reading. Each word was a scream now. Not out loud, but inside me. Like something ancient and wounded was clawing at the back of my thoughts, begging me to stop, begging me to listen. The chapel shook. One of the stained glass windows shattered from the pressure, spraying colored shards across the pews. Then the lights died. The candles were the only thing left, burning hot, tall and wild, flames reaching twice their normal height. I finished the final line of the prayer, and for the first time in days, there was silence. Total, bone-deep silence. The fog stopped moving. The book went still. Even the air felt different, like the pressure had been sucked out of the room all at once. I waited, eyes locked on the center of the circle. And then I looked up. He was standing across from me, not the veiled woman, not the thing from the fog. Me, but not me. Not quite. He looked like I had looked after the first night. The same clothes, the same unshaved jaw, the same sleepless eyes. But the skin was too pale. The hands were wrong. The fingers ended in dull gray nails. And the smile. The smile didn't belong to a human being. He knelt, slowly, never breaking eye contact, and placed his hand over the black book between us. His eyes flicked down to it, then back to mine. He whispered,
You finished the page.
I didn't respond. He nodded slowly, like a teacher pleased with a student who finally figured out the trick to the puzzle. Then he stood, turned, and walked back into the fog. I sat there, not moving, for a long time. Morning came. The sun filtered through the broken window, lighting up dust and soot and blood I didn't remember seeing before. The candles had burned down to nothing, just smoldering pools of wax. The circle was still intact, but the chalk had gone black, like it had soaked up something foul during the night. I stood, legs trembling, and picked up the book. The name list was gone. The pages were blank. All of them. Whatever had been writing them, whatever had been keeping count, it had stopped. For now. I walked through the chapel. The doors were still open, but the fog had retreated. Outside, the trees looked like trees again. The birds were back. The air smelled like pine and cold earth, not death. I found Margaret's rosary lying just outside the threshold. I picked it up, held it tight, and whispered her name. No answer. That afternoon, I burned the book, or tried to. I stacked dry wood, poured gasoline, wrapped the book in linen again, and lit the match. I watched it catch, I watched it burn, but the book didn't. The flames curled around it, licked the edges, turned the linen to ash, but the book remained untouched, black and whole. I buried it instead, took it deep into the woods behind the old cemetery, dug a hole so deep I thought I'd strike oil, dropped it in, filled it with dirt, packed it down with stones, and walked away without looking back. I thought about leaving St. Ovinus that night. I really did. I even packed my bag and loaded it into the car, got in, started the engine. But I didn't pull out of the driveway, because something told me it wasn't over. Not yet. That was 3 days ago. The chapel's been quiet since then. No bells, no fog, no voices in the dark. The trapdoor stays closed. I check it every night. The house still creaks too much. The lights flicker when I pray too loud. Sometimes I hear something breathing behind me when I brush my teeth, but I don't turn around. I don't ask questions. I've learned not to. There's a new envelope in the vestry now, sealed in black wax. No name on it this time. Just one word. Soon. I don't know how long I have, but I've rewritten the rules. There are 9 now. 1. Don't go down unless you're willing to come back changed. 2. Never listen to a voice that sounds like yours. 3. Holy water only works if you believe it will. 4. Salt buys you time but not safety. 5. Fire doesn't cleanse everything. 6. If you speak its name, it remembers yours. 7. It doesn't want to kill you. It wants you to finish what it started. 8. The circle keeps things out, but it also keeps things in. 9. If the bells ring a 4th time, run. And don't stop. I'm writing this down for the next poor soul who finds the book. Because it'll be back. It always comes back. Just don't break the rules. I did. And it's still inside me, waiting for the fourth bell.